listen-only mode.
Hi there, good afternoon, everybody. Hope you're all well and getting used to working from home in the strange times that we're having. Thanks for joining in the session this afternoon. We're going to try and keep this relatively informal. First of all, I'm just going to talk you through a few points on PowerPoint, just by way really as a bit of a update and refresher on some of the key terminology that we'll be using in the session. And then what we're going to do is jump straight into the Course Vision tool and take you through a demo on there. If you've got any questions at any point, then please put those into your control pad, raise your hand. My colleague Debbie is also on the line, so she'll be able to pick those questions up and stop me at appropriate time, and we can cover those off. So we're just going to now get underway. So my name is John Gray, Director of Further Education at Emsi. Sorry about the pause there. So just wanted to start off by, as a quick reminder, looking at the definitions of SIC and SOC. Really helps to do this before we get into the tool in too much detail. So as a reminder, standard industry classification. This is the terminology we'll be using in some of the session today. So SIC there, an example, a 1-digit SIC code of construction. We then work through the coding structure, 2-digit, 3-digit, 4-digit, right the way down to, as an example, construction of bridges and tunnels. And similarly, we can do that for occupations. So SOC, standard occupation classification. So we can do that at a 1-digit level for skilled trades. So quite a broad occupational group in there of skilled trades. And similarly, we can work right the way down through the 4-digit coding structure down to bricklayers and masons. Now, the important thing to remember on this is when we're then just looking at this in terms of the geographic detail, we can get that right down to local authority level. And therein lies the power of the Emsi data, that we can get right down to that kind of actionable level of data. So rather than saying, for example, construction jobs are going to grow by 10% in a region in the next 5 years, we can actually get that right down to a 4-digit level. So it's construction of bridges and tunnels and the key occupations that would be growing in that region. So just worth running through that first in a more of a pictorial way than in the tool. So we're using Course Vision to plan, and that's going to be what we're focusing on today. Again, before we actually get into the tool, I thought it's useful to show this slide. So this here is the 4 component parts of Course Vision, so the 4 sections. We will share the slides afterwards as well as the video recording. So what you'll be able to see on there is a nice, easy step guide to delivering your information in Course Vision. So if we start off on the left-hand side, economy overview. So what we're basically saying here is if you run the economy overview report, run it for your local area and your wider area. Remember, in Ofsted terms, they're interested to know that you're looking at, in terms of curriculum intent, your local, regional and national need. If you only run the report for a local or a regional area, then it's potentially going to miss something, whether that be an opportunity or a risk. So always do it for 2 or more areas. You know, there's no kind of upper limit on that, but always do a number of areas so that you can see what's happening in your locality and then much broader. So looking at you know, what does that report tell us? What does the economy overview tell us? What are the areas for growth, areas of decline, what are the in-demand skills, and so on. So we're going to work through each one of these 4 reports in Course Vision, but always just come back to this if you get stuck when you're working on things on your own. If you're not quite sure, don't remember what to look for in each report, what are the key steps, then you can just pop back to this as a little aid memoir. So before we get into the tool, just a reminder, we always like to put this slide up just so that you've always got the details there. If you need any support, you can always look in knowledge base, which probably deals with 80 or 90% of inquiries that we get through the help desk anyway. There's the intercom and help desk emails on there. Myself and Carla's email addresses and phone numbers. You know who your account manager is, and then keep up to date and the blog and the webinars, particularly at the minute with some of the key information that we've got around COVID-19. And that is myself there and Carla. So I'm just going to come out of the PowerPoint now, and we're going to hop over into Course Vision. So here now you'll see that we're in the Course Vision tool. And if you put this report, so the economy overview, if you put this on the left-hand side, so the reports were in a straight line, that's what we would have had on that PowerPoint slide a few moments ago. So economy overview, curriculum overview, course area snapshot, business case report, and we're going to go through those in that order. So a few things just to mention out to you along the way. By way of orientation. So up at the top here, a couple of useful little prompts. We can search into groups by looking in this section up at the top. So useful, just reference point there. But you've also got more information about support again. So like I've just said, you've got information about the Emsi data, which can often answer some of the questions. Knowledge base, which if you get stuck with some of the things like terminology, so for example, remind me of what a SIC or a SOC is, then you'll be able to find that information in there as well. Up at the top, you'll be able to see your login area. And one thing to point out in here is that we've just changed over now to the 2020 data. So this basically means that all of our data has been uploaded for the last decade, for the last year. So when we're looking at things like economy overview, the base reference data in there now is 2019, not 2018 as it has been in the past few months. So if you wanted to pop back to 2019, then you can do that, and then that would show the last full year's data as being 2018 and so on. So we're just going to stick to 2020, which will show 2019 as the last full year of data. So just back into report, we're in economy over. We're going to look at economy overview first. So I'm just going to clear this off. This was just recorded from my last session that I did. So first of all, we're going to pick the region. So this would be the region that you want to look at for your area. And as I said, just thinking back to what was on that slide, we always encourage you to do this for a number of areas. So I think for the purpose of this demonstration, I'm going to look at an area around Wakefield. Up in the north of England. What you do if you're actually running this for real to try and mine the data to support curriculum planning would be to run it maybe just for Wakefield, but then also to run it for a broader area as well. So as you know, with any of the Emsi tools, you can start to type an area. So we could start to type Wakefield. We could then select the local authority. What we could also do is we could select a drive time or a radius from the address. Or we could look at some other areas and groupings. I'm just going to select drive time because that's something that some of you may not have already seen. So how this tool works, we select a minute, a drive in terms of minutes from the address. I'm just going to pick a 30-minute address, 30 minutes, so a drive of Wakefield College. I think we may have a colleague from Wakefield on the call today as well. So we're just going to select that now. And then what that will do is it will work out a 30-minute drive time, and it will select as the local authority areas that are within that 30-minute drive. So you can see the blue line here, that denotes the 30-minute drive. And then if we work down here, look, so include regions where the drive time, and then you've got these selections. So contains your region centroid, the entire region, or part of the region. So I'm just going to click that and keep that with centroid. And we can change it whether we want it unitary authorities or local authorities. So we're going to do local authorities within 30-minute drive, and it's just a nice way to be able to select, make sure that you've got all the areas, all the bases covered. So you can see now what we've got is the 4 local authority areas: Leeds, Wakefield, Selby, and Doncaster. So that would be a good place to start looking at economy overview. What we could then do is work our way down, run another economy overview report, and this time just select Wakefield. So you get the idea there. So just going to run that report. So what we can see here then in the economy overview report, we're looking at an overview report for 4 areas in Yorkshire. We can see the total population. So as I mentioned earlier, this is now 2019. If you'd run this report a few weeks ago, it would have been 2018. Total regional employment, and average wages. So a couple of points to mention. This narrative here is taken from, it's really a summary narrative of some of the information that we'll see lower down in the charts. So I'm not going to dwell on this too much, but it's often a nice way to really quickly summarize some of the key information. And if you just wanted to use that in PowerPoints, in documents and so on, what you can do is click on the three dots, download the image, and then just paste that straight in there. So in terms of population for the area that we're looking at, population grew by over 49,000 in the last 5 years and is going to continue to grow, projected to grow in the next 5 years by 33,000. So strong growth there. Jobs grew by 78,000 in the last 5 years and are projected to grow by 20,000 over the next 5 years. So still some growth there, but the first thing of interest is that the growth projection in terms of the number of jobs isn't going to be as fast as the number of people in the population. So that's one that we'll unpack a little bit as we get further down. In terms of takeaways, we'll talk through some of this information further down. But the one thing I always like to point out is this area here of the top 3 industries supporting the economy. So this is the top 3 industries so it's top in the sense of the most people employed in that area, in those industries. So first we've got hospital activities, primary education, and temporary employment agency activities. Now the reason I always point that out is that for those of you who work with LEPs or other local government agencies, they'll often talk about the aspiration of what they want an area to be. So they want more engineering, more STEM, more digital, and so on. But this is actually based on government data, and these are the largest as now. So it's always important that colleges think about how we service and support these areas because they're the biggest. I'm just going to move spell on there. So again, one of the nice little features within the tool, and this is really useful for when you're using it yourselves, is that when you've been selecting regions and things like that, it remembers them as within your search. Obviously that region wasn't appropriate in terms of the Wakefield area that we're looking at now. So we're just going to skip through some of this other data and I'll explain this as we work through. So labour force breakdown, particularly useful for things like bids and tenders, and to give you that overall regional context, so the number of people employed, unemployed, and so on. Educational attainment level, working our way down here, we can see the proportion of people who have down to degree level or equivalent, and obviously you can look at those other areas as well. And again, that's the kind of thing that if we looked at that for a different region, so if we took out Leeds, that would probably then decrease the number of people with degree and equivalent. So that's where it's useful to know and understand your local, very local, and then more regional area. I'm not going to talk about demographics in too much detail, but as you can see, you can get into that data to understand that the breakdown of the age and ethnicity and so on. But first place we're really going to settle is on these charts. These are quite interactive, so we can get into this data now and look at a bit more what it means for this area. So first of all, looking at population trends. So this was summarized up at the top there, and in terms of narrative, and this is where we see this data appearing for the first time in the chart, and I'm just going to talk through this. So we can see here on the bottom axis that we're projecting out to 2024. And we're looking at population, so we can see there's a nice steady increase there in terms of population in this broader area over the next 4 years. If we then flicked over to jobs, we can then see that in chart format, and we can start to see that there's still some projected growth there. Obviously that's just starting to plateau a little, and in other parts of the tool, in the analyst tool in particular, we could get into looking at projecting right out to 2028, and what we'd actually see then is whether this starts to plateau or whether it kind of keeps that growth trajectory. Now clearly in the time that we're living in amidst the COVID-19 crisis, what happens after this point and during this point is going to be a little bit debatable anyway, and I'll try and cover a little bit more what we're doing about COVID towards the end of the session. So next down into population characteristics, again, just a nice little quick chart showing you the concentration for this area of millennials. So that's people aged 25 to 39. Again, if you took out Leeds, that would probably swing this. Proportion of retiring soon, so that's people 55 and older, and then proportional of racial diversity. And the proportions are measured against the UK as an average. Just going to skip past that next table. and then we're going to look at largest industries. So again, a nice little bar graph showing you the largest industries in the area. You can just quickly move across from jobs to growth, LQ, GVA, and wages. So I'm just going to look into growth. So we can see here top growing industries. So this is the top growth in the last 5 years. So it's not future growth, it's growth over the last 5 years. So what we can see here is the top growth industries have been transportation and storage, professional, scientific and technical, information and communication, and admin and support services. So remember when yes, hello, sorry.
Sorry, is the population growth all age groups or just workforce age to correlate with jobs growth? It was a question from Stuart. So is it is the population growth all age groups or just workforce age?
All age groups.
Workforce age.
All age groups.
All age groups, yeah. Right, great. Thank you.
Okay, so just looking at the industries, we've got the top industries as I mentioned. So remember the slides at the beginning when I talked about SIC and SOC. Now this is looking at things at a very high level of SOC. So most of these reports in the economy overview are a 1 or 2 digit SOC or SIC code. And the reason why we do that is to keep it really broad to show you what's going on in the economy. So the idea behind this is we're looking at some big themes, some trends, and it's going to ask you need to be thinking about questions within here that you want to ask yourself in other parts, in other reports, other parts of the tool. So clearly, information and communication is a very broad industry, and what we want to know is what sits beneath that, what is really driving that growth. So what are the more micro level industries driving that growth? But here we want to give you a broad overview because that might give you some other opportunities or risks to point out. So that's industry growth. We can then skip to LQ. So LQ is something that you'll see a lot within our data. LQ stands for location quotient, and LQ shows you the concentration of something in a particular area. So we're now looking at industries. So it's looking at the concentration of industries in this broader Wakefield area. So 1 is always the national average. So what we can see here is that anything above 1, you have a higher concentration of that in this area than in other parts of the UK. So looking at this top industry here, we've got electricity, gas, steam and air conditioning supply. That has an LQ score of 1.66. Hopefully you can see that there as I highlight it. The average LQ for the nation is 1. So that's 0.66 above, which shows that's significantly a higher concentration of this industry in this region compared to the national average, as is transport and storage, as is financial insurance activities, and his water supply. So again, remember we've got quite a broad region in here. If we took out Leeds as a big city, that may change then the ordering of this, and I'm sure that would probably mean that financial insurance would probably change position in there. But that's the idea again of looking at a local and a regional area to ensure you understand how we serve in those 2 different regions. So similarly, you could look at GVA and wages. We're not going to do all that in the session today. So that was looking at industries. This is now looking at workforce characteristics, so occupations. Again, we've got the largest industries at a 1-digit SOC code grouping. So professional is currently the largest, elementary is second largest. Again, to point out there that the little grey line denotes the comparison to the national average. And if we look at growth, we can see that professional have been the significant growth there over the last 5 years, and behind that associate, professional and elementary. So those of you who've been looking at our webinars and data releases over the past few months will have seen things around automation. So just to point out in there while we're in this section, so elementary is the area with arguably probably the most of its tasks within that job grouping automatable or will be impacted by automation and technology in its broadest sense. So always want to watch out for there because that's had strong growth, but lots of the jobs, lots of the occupations which sit beneath that broad category will be at risk of automation, or certainly the tasks within those occupations are at risk. Again, we could look at LQ, wages and postings for workforce characteristics, but I'm not going to go through all these things, just trying to give you an idea of the kind of things to look for, and then you can get into the tool yourself and look at the varying levels of data for your area. So all the data that we've looked at so far has been based on structured government data. So it's the data that we take from government annually, and then we build in the projection methodology into that. The next couple of sections within this report are job posting data. So we get this by scraping thousands of job boards across the UK, and then we aggregate this to give you the top skills. So this is regardless of industry or occupation. This is just looking at the top skills which were mentioned in job postings over the past 12-month period. So we can see here the top hard skills. Top hard skills, so in first place, accounting, in second, auditing, in third, agile software development. Again, this little grey line denotes the national average. So we can see here that accounting and auditing and agile software development all above the proportion for UK average, which again shows you the kind of the concentration of those skills in demand in this broad area. Now, a little tip here, what I always like to try and do is mentally cluster these skills into kind of similar industries or occupations. So if I give you an idea what I mean by that, so if you think about accounting, auditing, KPIs, financial services, forecasting are all things that we'd associate with the finance sector. So we can see there's a high sway towards financial skills in this region. We can also see that there's agile software development, SQL programming, which lean towards the more digital end. And then something else just to point out there, business development and selling techniques. So we see that often coming through in the data now that selling skills, business development, selling techniques, sales are one of those underlying skills within the economy that regardless of industry, lots of employers are asking for. So if you're not currently doing lots around sales, business development, I'd certainly urge you to have a look at that and see if that's prevalent in your data and see if that's something you need to beef up within study programs. We can then look at that skills of how that changes over time. So this is looking at the top 10 skills in the area over the last 4 quarters of the year. And the reason why we show it like this is just so that you can see how those skills are changing over time. So if we looked at business development, it started off in January 2019 in 3rd place, and it's now up to top place. And equally, you can start to look through the others. One thing to note, which is interesting, is that largely the top 10 skills are the top 10 skills. So regardless of the period in time, they seem to still be the top 10. I can't see any there which are not, which are new that have emerged. So yeah, interesting one for you to see there. So that's the economy overview report. So it gives you a really nice broad overview of what's happening in the economy. And from that, what we're trying to do is see some key trends, things which are growing, things which are declining, areas which we may want to look at in a bit more detail. We're then going to go into curriculum overview. So the data that I'm going to look in here in terms of the curriculum data set is just dummy data. The actual LMI data is real, but this is the area where if you're listening now and you've not uploaded your completion data recently, then please get in touch afterwards and we can do that. So what we do there is we upload all your completion data for the last academic year. So that's the number of people who completed each program. We then map that across to occupations and to job openings, and what that does then, it gives us some broad supply and demand. So I'm just going to now run that report. So what I'd have done is I would select of the my relevant data year. Just to point out, you can have different data sets. So you could look at just adult provision, just 16 to 18, just apprenticeship. So you can have as many cuts as you like in there. So I'm just going to pick this, which would be dummy data for a full academic year. Once we get into the report now, we can see in here that we got a number of filters down the left-hand side. So again, you could remove areas, you could limit the search by particular course areas, you could look at particular educational levels and change the time frame to increase the projection. You can also change your class of workers, so that's employees, so large organizations and proprietors which are self-employed. So what I'm going to do here is just put out the projection to 2028. Again, you can select an appropriate time frame as you wish. If you wanted to export data, you can do that from this table into Excel. So some people prefer to download the data into Excel and play around with it themselves. That's fine to do from this section. So first thing to check on here is we've got a list of the course areas. So what we can do here is we can either filter by course area, which are Emsi defined course areas, or sector subject area 2. So that's SSA 2, which tends to be used by Ofsted. For the purpose of this, I'm just going to use the Emsi course area. So what we've done there is we've pulled together different occupations into what we believe are suitable course areas. So it's not going to necessarily fit your course areas in your college, you know, as you appreciate, everyone's different. But what this does is give you a good starting point to look at. So to quickly talk through what this all means. So first of all, we have the course area code. We've then got the course area. So this, we're looking at courses relating to medicine and dentistry. We then have the number of completions. So as I said, this is just dummy data. So this would be your number of course completions. And we then projected that with other data around the labour market. So we've got annual openings and the variance percentage. We've also got, so we're showing the regional jobs for 2019 and the regional jobs in 2028. So we can see there, just hovering over these first, we can see that there's good growth there projected out to 2028 and a good annual wage. But the bit that we're really interested in at this stage is to look at the annual openings. So if this was real data, so this data is real, this is LMI data, this is dummy data for completion. So this would be your completion data once uploaded. So what we're looking at here is we can see that if this college was running qualifications in medicine and dentistry, they only put 20 people out into the marketplace, yet there's over 1,300 annual job openings. So that would be an area of undersupply, and we would certainly encourage that you look at where you could deliver more qualifications in that area. Now, a bit of a caveat here, just because a student has completed a medicine and dentistry qualification doesn't mean say they're going to be suitable for one of those openings. So what we're trying to do here is just give you some broad supply and demand. Clearly, if the gap is that big, then that's something that would encourage you to look into. This can also work the other way around, where you put more people out into the labour market than there's demand for. So I'm just trying to quickly see on here. Can't see any particular extreme examples of that. This one around maths and statistics could be because within the data we pull in some GCSE maths and English. Some people, sorry, GCSE maths. Some colleges like to include that, others like to take that out so that you're not skewing those figures. But I suppose one to look at there in terms of this dummy data will be security. So 269 completions within this data against the annual openings of 392. So clearly we're getting quite close to the mark there, where we're almost meeting supply with demand. So again, just to reiterate, we're not saying that just because somebody completes a course, they're going to get a job, but really broadly, we're trying to show you here where there's those potential opportunities. So whether you could deliver more of a qualification or look to running something new, or whether you are putting too many people out into the marketplace. So as an example here, if you if this college was running dentistry programs, so clearly here they're not, so there's 0 completions, yet there are 54 annual openings. So that could be something you want to look at in more detail as to whether you could run dentistry, and pharmacy is another example of that. So that's the curriculum overview report. So to give you a nice broad overview, mapping your curriculum to labour market data. So next off is the we're going to go into the curriculum snapshot. Now you can do this in 2 ways. We can either get into it from this report, or we could go back to the course vision menu and we could do course area snapshot from here. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to take you back into curriculum overview, and we're going to directly access this from the course area snapshot from the curriculum overview report. But I just wanted to point out that you can do it in 2 ways. So again, we're going to use the same data set, and we're going to run for the same region. This is going to take us back into the curriculum overview report. And what I'm going to do then is just pick an example at random for us to talk then about in more detail. So if we just look at health and social care as an example, let's say that we wanted to find out a bit more about that. So 683 completions and 3,154 annual openings. What you might also want to do at this stage as well is, so obviously this is just one course area, but you might want to put on there nursing, because that's relevant, counselling and care. So then you build out a nice broad area to look at. And again, what you can always do then, if that's too broad, is just start to deselect some of these areas so that you have a more refined look. So we're going to pick these 4 areas, and then what I'm going to do next is jump to course area snapshot. So then that will take us across to that next report along in course vision. So here we can see that for the 4 areas that we selected, So the 4 areas are here. So again, what you can do is you can quickly go from looking at a very broad area to a much more selected area by clicking on the cross and deselecting some of these. Equally, you could take out some of the local authority areas you're looking at. And again, we could change the time frame. So what we're looking at here for this really broad area of care and nursing is total jobs of 84,782 in 2019, which was 1% above the national average. And what we're showing here is a 3.9% projection out to 2028. And that's higher than the national average, which has a 2.6% projection. Strong average hourly wages compared to the national. Again, I'd encourage you to take this really broad data set and spend some time and look at each one of these variations and see which as an area is performing best, which may provide the most opportunities or risk. We then look at the occupations that we've selected. So within this grouping, within this 84,000, here are the major contributors there. So 2019 jobs, care workers, nurses, nursing auxiliaries, and so on. You can see the big players in there, so which make up most of those occupations, and again the number of annual openings. What we do then is to give this more context. So in that first report, in the curriculum overview report, it's hard to clearly see and link that particular to your college and your curriculum, whereas actually when you get into this section now, so this is all your completion data listed, which we've mapped then to these four areas of nursing and care. So if you understood your curriculum better, you'd be able to look down here, see the particular courses which we've pulled into this, see the number of completions, and then you can see that against the number of annual openings. So clearly here, if we were looking at this using real data, there would be a good opportunity to look at adding more people into this marketplace, really strong annual openings, and we're only running, almost 25% of that in terms of completions. So moving down, we can then see some regional trends. So what we've got on here is the region. So the region that we've selected, because we've selected 4 areas up here, four local authorities, that is our region. So if we only selected two areas, that would still be the region. So what you might want to do here is let's just deselect a couple of these a second. So let's take out Doncaster and Selby. So now we're just looking at Leeds and Wakefield. So if we just flick back up to the top for a second, we'll see that that's changed the job projections now quite significantly. So just to skip back down here. So what you might want to do on here now, so we've got Leeds and Wakefield. What you can now do on here is start typing other areas. So if we pick Doncaster, so we could put these areas back in that we've just deselected, but we're doing them on this tool so that you can now map and overlay looking at the specific regional trends for those areas. So the region is now Leeds and Wakefield, because those are the 2 areas that we've selected. We've got the national average, but then we've also got Doncaster and Selby on there as well. So we can start to see for particular regions, we can really understand that local and regional picture, and which has the biggest jobs in this example, 2019 and 2028. So because we've deselected some of those areas, we can now see this Leeds and Wakefield, so we can see clearly where the proportion of jobs are. So a big portion in Leeds compared to Wakefield. And if we added the other regions back in, so if we wanted to just put Selby back on this, for example, it would then show us that on this map and the number of jobs in 2019 in Selby as well. So what we have then, this last section on this report is looking at the top industries employing those the top 23 occupations in this course area. So hospital activities, temporary employment agencies, and so on. Not too many surprises on there. Where you tend to see a bit more interesting stuff on there is when you're looking at things like engineering, computing, those kind of areas where there may be some interesting things. So for example, one I spotted recently was software engineers. So you would expect that to be in a computing area, but it was one of the when we were looking at the industries, it was one of the top the top employers of software engineers was engineering. So again, it's just starting to make you think about things in how the industries and the the labour market is set up, not your particular curriculum areas. So that's always useful to consider. So that was course area snapshot. So we're just going to pop back into course vision again, just to point out you can export this. This time, because there's more charts and things on there as well, you can export it to PDF or Word as well as to Excel. So we've gone through economy overview, curriculum overview, course area snapshot. The final report in here is business case. So we've worked through from really broad, looking at what's happening in the region, started to map that into what's happening, mapping that against job openings and our curriculum, and then ultimately we're going to work down to this more granular level of detail now, which is business case. So again, we can keep the same area that we've selected, and we could change this if we wanted to. So you could change the radius from the address, look at a different drive time. You could just type in and select one of these areas. You can select course area. So the last one we looked at was around health and care, so we could choose that again if we wanted to. We could also search by job title, or we could search by skill. So I really encourage you to particularly to look at by skill. So if you know there's certain skills which are in demand in your region, so there'll be things which are talked about a lot. So it could be project management, it could be some kind of programming language, some kind of accounting skill. Then search that skill, and it will give you a different cut of the data. It will show you the occupations which are in demand around that skill. So it's something that we overlook. If we get a chance, we'll come back to that and have a quick look. So we're going to search by course area. Now, one little tip here that I always recommend is just to have a look at the browse list first. So I clicked on browse there. Have a look through the list and make sure that you're aware of all the different areas which may be relevant to your curriculum area. So I'll give you an example. I'm just trying to find it. Yeah, so if we looked at this, so what some people do, and I've seen them using the tool in this way, they'll type construction, they'll see construction general, and then just select that one area. But actually what you want to do as a starting point is probably pick plumbing and heating, bricklaying, carpentry, construction, plastering, maybe painting and decorating, floor and wall coverings, roofing. You get the ideas. So you look at these and you make sure that you build let's just pick stonemasonry and construction management. So you're looking at that entirety of the curriculum area, the course area for construction. Now that might be too broad for your particular course area and what you're looking at. But again, work from that basis of start really broad and then work your way much narrower. So pick those relevant areas, and I'd advise you to do that for whatever area you're looking at. Make sure that even if you don't select them now, be aware that there's another section in there. The last thing I want you to do is miss really important data because you've not selected something. So we've picked those areas, hit select, and then we're going to run this report. So again, on the left-hand side, we can see we've got the areas selected. Once you've looked through the data, you might decide that you want to deselect some of those. We've then got the jobs time frame. So as we had before, let's just change the time frame just to look at something different. So let's say 2023. And in this report, we can because we've got job posting data, we can also look at the time frame for the job postings. So let's just set on this. Let's look at March 2019 to March 2020. So we're looking at job postings in the last year. So this report pulls in lots of different pieces of data from within the broader analyst tool, and certainly sections that we've already looked at from Course Vision. So this report tends to be the go-to report for many people. If you're supporting curriculum areas, if you're a marketing function or curriculum planning function supporting curriculum areas to plan, this tends to be the one report that you pull off as a minimum to give that insight. If you're a member of curriculum staff, you might be producing some work around your own curriculum plan, or you might be going to a meeting and just need some information quickly. This is the one that we always say, this is going to give you a quick flavour of everything. So here we're looking at the total number of jobs for these 10 quite broad course areas. So just over 37,000 in 2019. And we can see that out to 2023, there's a 1.1% projection, growth projection, and that compares to a national average of 2.2%. Strong annual earnings, so hourly median wage compared to national, and there's 1,584 annual job openings across that broad area. Now, remember one of the first slides I showed was the ability and how we can go from that really broad 1-digit SIC code and SOC code right the way down to a 4-digit SIC and SOC. This is where that power really comes in. So what we have here, we write down at a 4-digit SOC code level. And what we can see within this data is where the, particularly where the jobs are going to grow or decline in this 4-year projection. So we can see here that electricians and electrical fitters, whilst there's still going to be a really good number of jobs, that's actually starting to decline over that period. Forklift truck drivers is going to be good growth for 3.9%. And then you see some different examples there, red, green, and so on. So the green are always going to be, relatively positive, some growth in there. The percentage can be a little misleading because whilst it's red and, you might look at that and think, panic stations, actually, there's still going to be a good number of jobs there for production managers. The percentage is relatively small, but nonetheless, I'd really encourage you to click on more, expand this out. And this is where you can really start to think, okay, well, are our courses, is the curriculum that we're delivering, how we align in this to support these occupations which have got projected growth. So if you look at this one down here, scaffolders, stagers, riggers, if I was a college around the Wakefield, Leeds area, I'd certainly be thinking about running something quite bespoke around that. Although the number of openings are relatively low, there's going to be some good growth in there. So you get the idea there, really understand, get into this level of data. Now, one thing to point out, so we're doing the session for Course Vision today. If you are to use the full analyst tool, then what you can do is click on one of these links and it will then take you into a more detailed overview about that industry. So that's one of the benefits of the analyst tool. This still gives you that great level of information, but analysts can just take it that little step further. So we then go from those occupations, we then come to some economic data. So we look at the aggregate changes. So basically here we're saying that for every 100 jobs in the area that we've selected, there's actually 165 created. So that's jobs, those other 65 jobs are in the wider economy. So maybe in other industries who are in this supply chain. And equally for every £1 that's earned, there's another 56p earned elsewhere within the wider economy. So again, things which may be not necessarily specifically in these occupations, but within that broader economy. So this is really good in terms of supporting things like Ofsted, bids and tenders, because it's showing you the value that something has on the economy, regardless of whether it's going to grow or not. We're actually showing you whether the significance of it within a local area. So things like leisure and tourism, always worth looking at in that context. Things like beauty therapy, sport, which are not necessarily going to have strong growth projections, but nonetheless play a vital role in our area. We can then look at job posting overview. So the first sets of data have been to look at whether there's a longer term demand for this based on the job projections, based on our projection methodology. We can then see the activity in real time. So in the last 12 months. So again, just to show you where we could change that, we could look at the last 12 months, or we could change it and look at the last few months. So just to look at the last 12 months, there have been 17,000 unique job postings in the area relating to these construction trades. So in totality, nearly 72,000 jobs. So each one of those jobs, each one of those unique jobs are posted on average 4 times. So they're making it onto 4 different job boards. And a regional posting average of 31 days. So jobs on average are live on websites for 31 days. We can then see the top companies posting for those jobs. So again, what I do is encourage you, if you're looking at supporting curriculum areas, if you're doing this for your curriculum area, click on more, look at the long list and see how many of these companies you're actually working with. If you're not working with them, think about employee engagement activity for how you can maybe work with them. Again, in the full analyst tool, what we can always do is search for these particular companies and look at the skills that they're actually hiring for. Now, to point out at this level, because we're looking at quite a broad area, there will be a lot of recruitment agencies in here because they tend to be the big recruiters. But remember, we picked about 10 different areas related to construction, so we can try and refine that a bit more. So to point out on here, we've got the number of unique jobs. So we've got, if we looked at Caliber Search, clearly a consultancy, a recruitment agency, they had 361 jobs which appeared you know, it turned out to be 1,718 job postings. So their jobs advertised, each unique job was advertised in 5 different places, and their jobs were live for 30 days on average. We can then see the top posted job titles. So this is useful for giving some context. So what are the jobs that have been advertised in the area? In terms of marketing, are we using the right terminology? Because these are the job titles that are being recruited for. Sometimes I've seen, you know, looking at college websites and things, they don't necessarily have that currency in terms of what people are asking. You know, in things like course leaflets, course guides, websites. Are we using the right job titles which the local labour market are actually hiring for? So just to skip down now into the hard skills. So the next 2 sections we're looking at hard and common skills. So we've looked at the longer term job market. Is there a demand for these areas in the future? We can then look at the hard and common skills. So the hard skills, we can see here that the top hard skill around these construction trades, AutoCAD, civil engineering, surveying, PPE, subcontractor, and so on. So again, really encourage you to deselect some of those areas above and see which skills are important to this sector. Now, clearly, in some cases, depending on the qualification, you can't always change the content of a qualification. If that's something you've bought from a particular awarding body, you know, awarding organisation. But I would certainly consider whether you're, you know, these have been mentioned in a high number of job postings. So AutoCAD has been mentioned in nearly 8% of the job postings. If you're not teaching AutoCAD, then consider where that could maybe be weaved into a program. Similarly for the common skills, and you know, this is something that I'm doing a lot of work with colleges on at the moment, looking at how we to support this development of common skills. So often the common skills are not something which you know, need to be taught very specifically as an actual skill. They're things which can be developed by teaching things in a particular way. So, you know, if you think about things like problem solving, as an example on here, is 4% of the, it was mentioned in 4% of the job postings. That's not something which necessarily has to be taught, but it's how you teach it. So how you get people, how you get young people together, not just young people, but any student, how you get them together around a particular subject area with a problem to solve. The key challenge then is how we then signpost that skill, so making it clear to those students that they've been studying problem solving, they've been developing that skill, and the fact that they may be particularly good at that. Again, think about one of the tips I gave you earlier was about how you cluster these skills together. So think about this in terms of communication, customer service, are quite similar skills. So you know, although we're looking at construction trades in this case, communication and customer service are still important skills. Communication at 11%, so it appeared in 11%, is higher than any of the hard skills. So it's even higher than AutoCAD. So it shows you how important communication and management are as skills. And then getting down into things like problem solving, detail oriented, which is attention to detail. So, you know, again, just shows you the types of common skills which employers are asking for, and those are things which can easily be taught, easily be added into a study program or into tutorial sessions. And we've got some great examples of colleges around the country who are really doing that and embracing that now, because even as we know that these skills are going to have lots of transferability. So if they're good at communication, customer service and problem solving, so if they've developed those skills in construction but they can't get a job in construction, there's going to be lots of other jobs within the economy which work on those skills, and what we can do then is more to signpost them skills to young people. Well, and to students in general, really. So that comes to the end of the 4 reports. Hopefully you'll see there's quite a logical sequence to how we work through them, and by starting off at this kind of really broad overview level, looking at lots of regions, then down to your locality, and then doing that for each stage as we work through, you'll certainly see some opportunities, some risks, some areas for development, and that's the way that we've tried to set the tool up. So a couple of things, a few minutes left, I wanted to try and touch back on. One was business case report, and let's wait for that to refresh, searching by skill. So as we just saw there, some examples around communication, problem solving, and so on. We could search for those skills and we could see where they appear in the economy, or we could look for something quite specific. So one of the things I mentioned earlier on was around programmers, software developers. So what we could do in here is we could search for things like Java, so Java programming language. So we could then just search for where that particular skill is mentioned in job postings in the labour market. So what we can see here is that just looking at that particular skill, so Java, there's going to be over 17,000 jobs requiring that skill in 2019, and again a significant change, significant increase out to 2023. Good strong median hourly wages. We can see that in terms of job postings that there's been just under 4,000 relating to that particular skill in the last 12 months. Again, the companies are hiring. The types of job title which are mentioning that skill. And then again, just to get down into the hard skills, clearly how this works, Java is 100% because that's what we've searched for. But what we can see then is the other clusters of skills which appear around this. So JavaScript programming language, agile software, Amazon Web Services, Python, and others. So you can start to see other skills which are important around in that same cluster as what the programming language Java. And again, we can then look at the common skills. So we can clearly see here that for those jobs which are advertising for Java programming language, they also want people to be innovative, have good communication skills, and good at infrastructure and problem solving. So a really nice way to look at that and cut the data. So just to look at a different skill. So if we, as we looked at things around communication, so we could type in communication. Again, there'll be quite a lot of different types of communication. So make sure that you select the right one. Some of these are hard skills, so communication studies, but we're looking here just for the broad common skill of communication. And then you can see the importance of that skill within the economy. So 51,000 jobs have mentioned that particular skill. Sorry, 51,000 jobs reliant on that skill in 2019, and a good projection. So jobs needing that communication skill out to 2023. The top occupations in there. And again, we can just look down at those skills again and see that, you know, in this case, where communication appears as the highest ranked skill. We've also got auditing, accounting, KPIs. So a lot of those kind of financial industries are looking for communication as a skill as well. So just another way to get into that and look at the data from a different angle. So what I wanted to just do next is just pop out of this for a second. I've mentioned a couple of times about COVID-19. So some of you will have already seen this data. And just let that refresh for a second. So clearly, a couple of times within the report, within the reports, within the data, we've looked at projections, and some of that projection goes out to 2028. We can also adjust that to look at the next couple of years. Now, clearly, if the current situation goes on for any length of time, those projections will need further work undertaken to make sure that they're accurate. So what we're doing at the moment, if you've not already seen this, we're working on the impact that coronavirus is having on things like job posting data, with the intention being that at some point in the future, we may need to change how we structure the data so that we make the projections more accurate. But for now, our economists are advising that because we're still relatively a relatively short time into this, the longer term projections will still be relatively accurate. You know, there's enough time for the market to recover. If the situation goes on for a number of months, 2, 3, 4 months, then clearly the projections will start to lose some validity, some reliability, and then we will introduce ways to counteract that. So fine using the numbers for now. Alongside that, please keep your eye on the dashboards that we're using. What you'll be able to see on the Emsi website, and again we can send the link out with this afterwards, is the job posting data. This is just an older version of the tool that I'm looking at. what we'll do is we'll send you the right version out. So the tables are exactly the same. I've just gone into an old version of the dashboard, but the reports are in principle are the same. So what we're doing is we're showing you things like how job postings in 2019 are comparing to 2020. So clearly here we can see that from the 7th of March, the number of job postings literally fell off a cliff. And obviously what that starts to mean for a local area can have far-reaching consequences. We're then looking at the occupation groupings which are most affected. We can look at that by region, and on the on Emsi's website, you can go on there and on the COVID dashboard, and you can actually request a localized regional report for your area. And we can see then in this screen, quite small there, but you can see the top jobs which are still recruiting, so the ones which are still being recruited for, and then this bottom chart is the ones which are actually in decline. So which occupations are seeing the biggest decline in terms of that job posting analytics. So keep an eye on that dashboard. Apologies, I've just pulled the wrong one up there to show you, but keep an eye on that. Request your localized report, see what that means for your area, and then be sure, because one of the big things that we'll need to do as the sector is, as we come out of the crisis, is support our local communities as they start to grow again. It will be important to know what's growing first, what are the skills that are in demand, and how can we support that. So you know, please have a good look at that. So just to finish off with, I'm just going to show you something else quickly. Debbie, while I'm just pulling this up, if there's any more questions, then please just let me know.
No, we have no more questions.
Okay, so just to finish off, last minute or so, I just wanted to show you this little tool called Engage. So this is an infographic generator. So something that we've been asked a lot for in the last few weeks. So clearly there's been, you know, in terms of working from home and in terms of marketing, student recruitment, the ability to actually engage now with students and things like open day schools engagement is gone, you know, for the foreseeable future. So we've had lots of our clients reach out to us and ask us how we can support, how tools like Career Coach can support. So what I wanted to do is just show you that some of the I know the colleagues on the call today have Career Coach tool. This is a very specific tool that we developed, which doesn't need the use of full Career Coach, but nonetheless is a really nice way to provide quick, engaging social media content for your websites and so on, which is why I wanted to just show it you quickly today. So in a nutshell, quickly how this works, we can look at occupations, industries, or regions. So we can select a particular occupation. Note the region's already pre-selected because that's what we've just been looking at. So let's say one of the occupations we were just looking at talking around was software developers, so programmers, software developers. Again, we could put multiple. What that then does, so we're looking at programmers, software developers in Selby, Leeds and Wakefield. We then pull in some relevant Emsi labour market data around that particular occupation. So here we can see total jobs for programmers and software development professionals out to 2022. So a nice growth trajectory on there. So we could select that. If you wanted, you could change the year. So we could rebase the year at 2019. We could change a projection to 2027. Again, we can see there's still quite although it starts to flatline a little, there's going to be a good number of jobs there in the future. We can select the chart color, the line color, so we can make this more aligned to your corporate colors. So let's just stick with like a nice dark green color, and then we can add that to our infographic. So you can select up to 3 of these little infographic charts, and that would then, if you selected 2 or 3 together, you could export those all together. At the minute, I've just produced 1. We can then look at the style. So we could change the font, the text color, the layout, and the background, and then we just export that. So the reason why we designed this is really quickly for to help support with engaging social media content. This is really good support in terms of marketing recruitment. If you were running courses around programmers, software developers, games design, you know, similar kind of courses which would link into this kind of an occupation, then it's a nice way to talk about that on social media and show how this links in terms of things like the job projections. You could also look at hourly wages, some of that other labour market data that was available in there. And all what you do from here is you select whether you want a small, medium or large size image and then export it. And then in a few seconds that will just pop up with our image. And all what you do there is copy and paste that. And you could drop that straight into your social media content. Now, what some colleges have done is taken that and then applied some corporate design over it, but we've just designed it in a nice, clean, simple way. So if nothing else, if you didn't have design skills, you could just use that. And as I said, just give some description about what it is, what are you looking at and why it's important, and the link to your courses. So I just wanted to finish off with that because Course Vision is a great tool. We're using data to help us to plan, to inform curriculum strategy. It's also then really useful to use that same data to drive careers insight. So I thought it would be a nice way to finish off. So if there's any questions, anybody want to ask anything, please feel free to do so now. And if no questions coming over the next few seconds, please stay safe, stay well, keep in contact with us. If there's things that you'd like to cover in more detail than what we've done today, then please just reach out and myself or one of my colleagues can help you with that. So no more questions, Debbie?
No more questions. Thanks, John.
Thank you. Stay safe, everybody. Bye.